Hello everybody. Today in this new session, we are going to discuss about the neuroanatomy and the physiological circuitry of the hypothalamus, which is one of the most important topic, not only in the CNS, but also the physiology as a whole, because it is the center by which our neuroendocrine or neurohumoral mechanism are basically regulated. So without wastage of time, start with the hypothalamus, where it is exactly located in our central nervous system. So within the central nervous system, as we know, there is a part which is known as the diencephalon. So hypothalamus is basically situated within the diencephalon. That we need to know first. So diencephalon is the site where this hypothalamus is basically situated. Now, as its name denotes, hypothalamus, so hypo means the below here. So, as we know, within the diencephalon, the most important structure is the thalamus. So, suppose if it is a thalamus, that means this hypothalamus must be situated just below this thalamus. So, below and behind of the thalamus within the diencephalon, this hypothalamus is situated. Next, if you go further, then we try to understand where it is exactly located within the diencephalon. Suppose within the diencephalon, it is the third ventricle, and just surrounding the third ventricle, the structure is the sheet of gray matters. Sheet of gray matters. So these are the sheet of gray matter, one at the left side and one at the right side. So here it is suppose left and here it is suppose right, and this is the third ventricle. So from this diagram we can understand this hypothalamus is situated below and behind of the thalamus within the diencephalon, and it is present surrounding the third ventricle, and which has two parts. One is the left sided part and one is the right sided part, and this left and right side again can be divided into two zones. One is the lateral part of the left hypothalamus, medial part of the left hypothalamus, and one is the lateral part of the left hypothalamus and medial part of the right hypothalamus. Now which one is the lateral and which one is the medial, how we can understand? Just lateral to the third ventricle will be the medial side. So this is of course the medial side of the one-sided hypothalamus. It is also medial side of the left-sided hypothalamus. So away from the third ventricle is the area of the lateral side of the left hypothalamus, and it is also the lateral side of the left hypothalamus. Now, next important structure that is present within the hypothalamus is the mammillary swelling or mammillary body. So at the posterior side of the hypothalamus is the mammillary body or mammillary swelling, we can say. So suppose it is like that, and anteriorly there is another swelling which is known as the tuber cinereum. So it is the swelling of the mammillary body, and this is the swelling known as the tuber cinereum. Okay, now after that what structure will come through? This is the infundibular stalk. So it is known as the infundibulum or infundibular stalk, and from where the pituitary gland will form, and this is suppose the anterior part of the pituitary and this is the posterior part of the pituitary, and again will go up and it will join with the mammillary body. So it is the anterior pituitary and it is our posterior part of the pituitary gland. So this is all overall schematic diagram of the hypothalamus. Now in front of this hypothalamus, the important structure. So before we are going in detail in this thing, we should know which one is the anterior and which one is the posterior. Of course, this part is the anterior part, and this part will be the posterior part. So in the anterior part of the hypothalamus, the most important structure which is located is known as the optic chiasma. And this optic chiasma will form from the bilateral optic nerve, which will coming out from the eyeball. So it is our beautiful eyeball. It is our beautiful eyeball, where from this optic nerve will generated. So this is the optic nerve. This is also the optic nerve or second cranial nerve pathway. And this is the optic chiasma. Optic chiasma. And in front of this hypothalamus, the structure, most important structure will be the optic chiasma. We should never forget this thing. And in the posterior half, what important structure will be present? One definitely is the thalamus, which is over and above the hypothalamus. And from the posterior end, from the mammillary body, the important structure will coming down, that will be the midbrain, pons and medulla. That means the brain stem. So in the left side, there will be one part of the thalamus, and right side of course there will also a part of the thalamus is there. So this is the thalamus at the right side, and this will be the left side. And from there, uh, posterior end of the hypothalamus, the midbrain will come out, then pons will form, medulla and spinal cord. And similar with this thing will go on. So this part will be the midbrain, this part will be the pons, and this part will be the medulla. And from where spinal cord will generate. And of course, this is our thalamus. One side, right side, left-sided thalamus, and one is the right-sided thalamus. So this is overall the situation or the position of the hypothalamus. Again, if we summarize all these things, but where exactly our hypothalamus is situated, that we can say that it is present within the diencephalon. It is present just below and behind of the thalamus within the diencephalon, and it is surrounded by anteriorly optic chiasma, posteriorly the brainstem, inferiorly the infundibular and the pituitary gland, that is the anterior pituitary and the posterior pituitary. And of course, this hypothalamus, which is a sheet of gray matter or collection of cell bodies or nucleus, which is present surrounding the third ventricle. And each sided hypothalamus again will be divided into two zones. One is the lateral and one is the medial. Medial part of the one of that sided hypothalamus is situated just medial to the or just lateral to the third ventricle, and away from the third ventricle there will be the so just lateral to the third ventricle will be the medial part, this medial part of the hypothalamus, and away from the third ventricle will be the lateral part of the hypothalamus. So this is the overall position of the hypothalamus. Now, as we understand the within the diencephalon, the structures are present, that is the thalamus and also the hypothalamus. There is another structure is present which is known as the epithalamus. So what is epithalamus and what are its component, that we need to understand first. So suppose this is our thalamus, and this thalamus posterior part important nucleus are present, which are known as the habenular nucleus. So each sided thalamus bilaterally, the nucleus that are present is known as the habenular nucleus. So both bilaterally this habenular nucleus is present, and it is connected with each other by a commissure, which is known as the habenular commissure, which is known as the habenular commissure. Okay. And just posteriorly, the important gland that is present, which is known as the pineal gland. So this is our pineal body or pineal gland or pinealocyte, pineal gland. So together this habenular nucleus, habenular commissure and the pineal gland will ultimately form the structure which is known as our epithalamus. So this is the epithalamus. Epithalamus. So again, one habenular nucleus. Here also one habenular nucleus. So 1 plus 1, 2 habenular nucleus, one habenular commissure, and third one is the pineal gland. These are the three component of the epithalamus. What is its clinical importance? Yes, there is definitely a clinical importance of this pineal gland, because this pineal gland will ultimately synthesize and secrete the most important hormone, which is known as the melatonin, which is also known as hormone of darkness. So melatonin is synthesized and secreted from this pineal gland, and it will the key regulatory hormone for our sleep wake cycle. So melatonin is the key regulatory hormone for our circadian rhythm or sleep wake cycle. And this circadian rhythm and sleep wake cycle was completely described or analyzed in our last tutorial session. If you really want to understand about the circadian rhythm and the role of the melatonin, please go through this tutorial session of the circadian rhythm, which is present in our YouTube channel, and you can understand it better. So with having this idea, let's move on the next part. That is the nucleus of the hypothalamus. So